Well, I love a podcast called Smartless. Makes me laugh. Interviewing Ron Howard. He actually started acting when he was 2 years old, how things should be done and what should be said. And he said nearly in every case they were ignored. It was the first good idea you had, you know. Keep them coming, keep them coming, right? This is the dialogue. Thou shalt not move from that.
Yeah, we paid a lot of money for that script.
We paid a lot of money for that.
And you're going to follow it.
It's a simple idea, that ideas can come from anywhere. Welcome to Anecdotally Speaking, a podcast to help you build your business story repertoire. Hi, everyone. I'm Shawn Callahan.
And hey, everybody, I'm Mark Shank. And it's your turn in the chair this week, Shawn, to share a story, which we'll then unpack and talk about why it works and how to use it in a business context. So what do you got for us this week?
Well, I love a podcast called Smartless. Makes me laugh. But I'm amazed at how many times I've written things down based on things I've heard in Smartless. And this particular episode was interviewing Ron Howard. Of course, we all know Ron Howard as the amazing director of Apollo 13 and many other movies. But what you might not know...
And Happy Days, of course.
Oh, well, yes, of course, that was one of his acting roles. And I suppose this is really about his acting career. He actually started acting when he was 2 years old, right? Obviously a family in the business. And so that means he's been in shows since the 1950s. He's had over 80 acting roles. And he sort of says, talking to the guys from Smartless, he was sort of saying those early days of acting sort of set him in good stead in terms of some of the life lessons, if you like, that he learned along the way. And one actually happened when he was 7 years old, right? So at 7 years old, he was on the Andy Griffith Show. And, Ron would, sort of do his lines, do his scenes, but he was often making suggestions to the director about his part. He had ways of, how things should be done and what should be said. And he said nearly in every case they were ignored, right? Anyway, one day, Ron, he's got a scene where he walks through a door, has to deliver some dialogue, and he just doesn't feel right for him. And he sort of goes to the director and he says, look, I don't think a 7-year-old would say that. And of course the director says, so what would they say? And he gives the director the new line, and the director goes, yeah, fantastic. Let's do it. Of course, he was thrilled. That afternoon, he goes up to the director and, sort of thanks him for accepting his idea. But he did say, look, but I have noticed that I've had lots of other ideas and they've been ignored. And the director just looked him in the eye and sort of said, look, it was the first good idea you had. Keep them coming, right? And Ron was sort of saying, just because you've got an idea doesn't mean it's going to be a great idea. But at the same time, he loved this sort of concept of creating a space where ideas could come from anywhere, right? And they're part of the mix, and they weren't shut down. And he learned that at such an early age. And, and I think, some directors are very good at, and work in a way that allow their actors to, sort of experiment and try things out and make suggestions. I think Martin Scorsese is very much like that. And then there are other directors who it's about the script. There's the script, this is the dialogue. Thou shalt not move from that.
Yeah, we paid a lot of money for that script.
We paid a lot of money for that.
And you're going to follow it.
Yeah. So anyway, I heard that and I liked that. And I thought maybe our listeners would enjoy that little story.
Yeah, I love it. So when you were telling it, what did you like about it?
I like the image of Ron Howard as a 7-year-old. Right. I can sort of, all the way through, I'm imagining him on that set. I don't really have a strong picture of what the Andy Griffith Show is. But I believe, it was a little drama, comedy drama. There's a policeman and, sort of family stuff, normal sort of, sitcom, I guess. And And so, yeah, so imagining him in that environment. I think the other thing I like about it too is it's a simple idea, you know, that ideas can come from anywhere. And but not, and it's always like two ideas. Ideas can come from anywhere, but not every idea is a great idea. Just because you've got an idea doesn't mean it is the one that everyone's just going to grab onto and you know, put into action. So I think those two things probably I found interesting in that story.
Yeah, and that second one I really enjoyed. Yeah, yeah. Just
Yeah,
because you've got an idea doesn't make it a good one.
yeah,
It just makes it
exactly.
an idea, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, the other thing that I was, and because I was imagining that scene, you know, I sort of there was a moment in the story where the director's giving him the feedback, you know, after the scene, and I was just sort of thinking, okay, well, what does that look like? So, you know, he's looking direct in his eye. In fact, I should have got him to crouch down a little bit, you know, to a 7-year-old's eye height, if you like, and said, look, Ronnie, it was a good idea. It was the first good idea you've had. You know, it's sort of like drawing people into that moment, because that's the moment, right? That's where the whole thing has been delivered. All the rest is just the lead up to that last line in that story.
Yeah, and for me, the 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 dialogue, you know, like Ron Howell was saying, this is not how a 7-year-old would say it.
Yeah.
The dialogue that you delivered, it that's not how a 7-year-old would do it. And I had difficulty picturing a 7-year-old in that. And so just exactly as you've said, some small thing that actually puts, well, Ron Howard sounded like a much more, way beyond a 7-year-old in
Yes.
the dialogue that was. So just something that actually looks at it from a 7-year-old perspective. And
yeah, that could help. That could help,
yeah.
right? Just help people, you know, sort of get settled with it. Of course, a 7-year-old in the 1960s is a bit different to a 7-year-old today, I think. Primarily because everyone's distracted and you know, it's a different way of talking. I've heard, you know, kids talk back then, which are like talking like adults today, for example. So, but I take your point though. You know, you want to get people to imagine what a 7-year-old is doing when they're chatting to a director.
Yeah, it's yeah. I'm debating in my mind whether it's because delivering the story as an adult, as you did there, would it add value? Well, and the reason I raised this is because it was a little niggle as you were doing it. I'm going, you know, Ron Howard sounds very, you know, like mature beyond a 7-year-old. I don't think a 7-year-old would do that type of thing. And if that seed is in your audience mind, then that can have an impact on the credibility, the plausibility,
the adoption of what you're saying.
Do they embrace your wisdom? But so finding some mechanism to put Ron Howard, you know, little spotty-faced 7-year-old,
you're right.
Somehow
you're
take
right.
people there.
You know, and there's sort of two ways you could tackle it. One is to, you know, make Ron sound more like a 7-year-old, you know, and how he interacts with the director. Another way is to sort of say, look, Ron's been on sets since he was 2 years old. You know, he's very comfortable in that space, and he has just around him all adults. That's his whole life, is how adults speak. And so, you know, you can do it that way, where you sort of explain why Ronnie is, you know, addressing a director in this way. So, you know, well, you know, I don't think he would talk that way. I think I've got a better way for him to say that scene. You know, I've got some better dialogue. Maybe he did talk. Maybe he did speak that way. Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, well, yeah. And so I guess it's a minor. It is a relatively minor point, and I don't want to focus too long on that, and kind of take away from the overall really positive. You know, like it's a really good story. And so, yes, this is a tiny little thing that might change. I'm not. You can actually screw it up if you work too hard on
Yeah,
trying
yeah, right.
to
Trying to address that issue.
Now just imagine him. He's got long socks and he's got a pair of shorts on.
The It was really interesting listening to Ron Howard. He was full of leadership, knowledge, if you like. He had this other thing I'm sort of vaguely recalling, but he was sort of had a ratio in his mind when he's working with his crew, and that is, I think the ratio was like a 1-to-7 ratio, I think he said. And a 1-to-7 ratio was he wants to be able to say yes 7 times for every no that he says. And the reason why he has that approach is that he believes he's hired the very best people, right? If you've got a cinematographer who's like world-class cinematographer and comes up to you and says, look, I think I want to do it this way, this way, this way. He wants to say yes to that guy because, he's a professional. He knows what he's doing. And his job is to have the higher purpose in mind, right? Look, maybe he wouldn't have done it that way, but he can't say no to that because it will get him to the higher purpose that and the only time he says no is when he doesn't think it will get us to that higher purpose. And I thought, wow, what a great sort of understanding of the leader's role in an organization, especially when you're dealing with people who are, the absolute top of their game. So anyway, that was just a side issue.
But I'll tell you, like last week you said, I told a side issue in last week's episode and you said, the side issue was better than
the story. You reckon that might be better?
No, I don't think it's better, but it's at least as good.
Yeah, right.
So we have a whole new category, which is Ron Howard wisdom.
That's it. Exactly. Shit that Ron Howard says. Yeah. So I know, right. I guess let's think about do you want to get to have a chat about where we'll actually use a story like this?
Yeah. The business application.
Yeah.
And well, this is going to be in my story bank, and I can see situations where I can use it, particularly where you've got somebody who's got an idea or an opinion, and they're really enamored of it.
Right.
And
right.
It's like, just get across the point that yes, you've got an idea, you've got lots of ideas, doesn't make it a good one. Just because you've got an idea doesn't make it a good one, no matter how much you love it.
Yeah, I mean, the angle I would take on this is probably the other side of the story. The fact that Ron Howard in this case, the director is taking on an idea from an unexpected, sort of source, if you like. And like, if I saw someone in a team who I thought had ideas, but they weren't delivering them up, I think this would be a good story to tell. Like, even a 7-year-old on a set gets to say his ideas, when they're a good one, there's a sort of proviso. But it's sort of about how do we encourage ideas to be put out there, right. and go through the rough and tumble of whether the idea survives, right? Because once it's out there, that's when it gets, tested out, as to would it be one that we actually put into place. So I think you're right. There's 2 main business points or angles on the business point.
Yeah. And then you bring in that second story you told, which is about saying yes more than you say no, and
right.
You bring that in, and if you are doing that, then people are more likely to put forward ideas. If you're,
yeah, that's right. You're creating
ideas can come from anywhere, even exactly. A 7-year-old.
Yep.
And we had an episode on the podcast not long ago. In fact, just before Christmas, I think, from about the Apollo, the race to space in the 1960s, and
yep.
And how the scientists, or the actual the computer programmer's 7-year-old daughter came up with an idea, And it was
years.
initially
Everything happens at 7.
7. Yeah.
My wife keeps reminding me that for my life, everything happens when I'm 7 and 12. She laughs. Like if you know, like if we have a childhood memory, and she'll now say, "So when did that happen? Was that when you were 12?"
Obviously, very memorable years for you, Shawn.
Clearly. Yeah, I think that's true. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Fantastic. Well, I think this let's give it a rating. Over to you, Mr. Schenk.
So, so that I'm going to give that the 7-year-old Ron Howard story. I'm going to give that a 7. I think it's a very, very serviceable story, and I intend to use it. And I'm going to give the 7 yeses for every no. I'm going to give it a 7.5.
Yeah, look, I'm going to give it an 8. It's a story I've already told a few times. I get a good reaction to the story, and you know, people, and I think they love the idea of imagining a 7-year-old Ron Howard, you know, speaking up as a little pipsqueak. So it's a story that does have resonance for people. So yeah, 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Nice.
Terrific. Well, let's wrap things up. Anything else we need to let our listeners know, Mark?
Well, we've released our 2023 schedule of public events, public programs on the website. So if you're interested in, particularly for people who are thinking about building a storytelling capability either in their organization or in a leadership team, or indeed for sales teams, then get in touch with us because we're very happy to offer a free place on those courses for people who are evaluating to the program. We just believe that it's once you experience it, you have a much better understanding of what you're getting and, of course, whether it's suitable for your organization. Try before you buy.
Yeah. And in fact, you reminded me something to share. So a couple of weeks ago, I had an email from a team leader in Microsoft who said that her team was reading Putting Stories to Work, and they were set to have a conversation about it, you know, sort of a group discussion. And did I have any questions, you know, that would guide a group through a conversation? And I went, oh, actually, that's something I've never really thought about. And I thought it was a good idea. So I sat down and I wrote about 20 questions, which I thought might be useful to kick off various conversations. So I put together a discussion guide, and you'll find it on our website. If you go to the page which talks about putting stories to work, you'll find it as just a free download, and it's a couple of pages. And if you're reading Putting Stories to Work and you've got a team who's doing that, it could be a good conversation starter. So anyway, a little resource to play around with.
Yeah, and of course, those conversations really help embed the concepts and get people much deeper into the idea of what is this thing called story and how can you use it in your everyday business lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, then. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening to Anecdotally Speaking. And, of course, tune in next week for another episode on how to put your stories to work. Bye for now. Anecdotally Speaking was engineered by Dave Stokes from Author to Audio.